What's up guys? So I decided to start a YouTube channel so I could show you guys a little more behind the scenes on how I create my content. First, I wanted to start by making an editing tutorial on how I edited one of my favorite photos I've taken, showing you how I took an image from this to this. So I was hanging out of the back of a truck, taking a photo. We were driving forward as he was driving at us on the bike. I couldn't do a slow shutter to get the shutter drag, so I'm gonna be showing you also how to recreate that effect in Photoshop. So let's jump right into Lightroom and I'll show you where I start. First thing I'm gonna do is crop the image for Instagram, which is a 4:5 ratio. Then I'm gonna straighten it, putting the horizon on the top third line. Now that that's done, I'm gonna go down and drop the highlights to pull back some of that detail. I did shoot in RAW, so I have a lot more detail. And then I'm also gonna lift the shadows, drop the whites, add some contrast. Just things that you go back and forth between these little panels in the basic module. Dropping the blacks, pulling back some contrast, making those dark areas darker. I'm gonna drop some of the clarity. That's just a personal touch. I like things to look a little softer because I find that pictures nowadays are just super sharp, so that kind of takes off some of that edge. Then I'm gonna cool it down a little bit. It looks a little warm. Now going down into tone curve, I'm gonna add a fade in the blacks, lift the mid-tones, maybe lift the shadows a little bit, lift the highlights, just making that standard S-curve, trying to add contrast back in, and then also adding in my fade in both the highlights and shadows. Then I'm gonna go down into hue and saturation. I'm going to make the blues a little more teal, the oranges a little more red to give that fiery look. Then desaturate it a little bit just to pull back a little bit of that strength. I'm gonna lift the luminance of the orange to give it more of that glowy look from the sun, really emphasize that light. Then split toning. I always add blue into my shadows just to keep a consistency across it. Some people don't like because it can make it look a little unnatural, but if you just do a little bit, I notice it can add a consistent look through all your photos. And you can also pick whatever color you want. I just have this nice blue teal. Some people add warm tones like oranges or yellows in their shadows. You can pick whatever color you want. Now down to sharpening, I'm just gonna mask it. If you hold Alt on your keyboard, you can drag this masking slider and it'll show you what it's sharpening. So I only want it to sharpen the edges. So if you hold it and slide it, you can see it's just sharpening him now. Then I'm gonna go down, enable some lens corrections such as chromatic aberration and profile corrections. This will just help get rid of any flaws that the lens had. But then I'm also going to add a vignette to bring back some of that vignette because I like that natural darker corners to bring your attention back to him. Now back up to the basic. After just tweaking all those tools, I want to tweak a little bit more just in the basic, so I'm going to make it a little brighter. Then also drop the highlights to compensate for that. Drop the blacks, make it a little more poppy. I'm going to dehaze down a tiny bit because I noticed that this makes images have a certain glow to them. Now I'm going to go into a selective adjustment, so I pulled up a gradient filter and I'm drawing it in that bottom corner. Notice I go along with where the light naturally was. I don't want to create fake shadows, but I want to emphasize what was already there. So I'm darkening that bottom right corner just to make it more dramatic. And then I'm also going to add some blue back into that upper right corner because I want some blue in the image so it's not all orange. Now I'm going to make a selective radial filter over the sun. I like to drop clarity of bright highlights. It kind of mimics the Orton effect. Now I'm going to make a radial filter across his body to emphasize that sun streak, that little lens flare. So I'm gonna invert it, then brighten it, just to create kind of a false streak coming from the sun, almost like an anamorphic lens flare. Then I'm gonna draw one more around him and brighten him up. And now I'm gonna jump into Photoshop. If you hit Command E, it'll shortcut all your Lightroom adjustments straight into a Photoshop file. Now that we're in Photoshop, I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and then Radial Blur, and then make sure to hit Zoom, and then the best quality, of course. Now for the amount, I kind of just play with it until it looks natural, but you can also affect this by just choosing an amount that's kind of too strong, and then dropping the opacity later. I'm just going to create a mask and then mask him away. I'm gonna add a little bit of extra contrast with this curves layer. Hit Command S and bam, we're done. Looking at the difference between those two after adding that Photoshop effects, you can see that adding that motion blur around him, but keeping him sharp, really just emulates that slow shutter speed that you see in car photos all the time. I just couldn't do it because I was on the bumpy back of a truck, so I couldn't keep my framing the same to keep him sharp. Make some final adjustments before exporting, and here's my final image. Glad I could share with you guys my process of how I edited this picture. All right, I hope you guys liked that tutorial on how I edited this picture of mine. I'm gonna be trying to make more editing tutorials, maybe some behind the scenes, just kind of messing around on YouTube, see what type of videos I can come up with, and see you guys in the next one.